we perceive and what is to be reality are two very different things. Today, you see me standing here at the age of 26. I'm the CEO and designer of my namesake clothing line, Mary Young. I also power a movement called the Self-Love Club, where I encourage open and authentic conversation around body positivity, self-love, and self-care. Outside of work, I'm very passionate about the creative community. I encourage women to embrace themselves and to challenge themselves. I also focus on my health and my fitness activities and really push myself to the limits. This is what you see. But 10 years ago, if you were to tell me this was my future, I wouldn't have believed you. 10 years ago, this didn't look like my life. This didn't seem something I could have. When we look at our lives, a lot of moments will happen that will change everything. For me, that day was November 3rd, 2007. I was playing rugby in gym class. I grew up with an older brother, so I knew how to play and jump in there, and so I did. I got right in, and I ended up taking a few heavy hits to the head, and I got a concussion. It was a grade 1 concussion, so for those of you who know, that's not the worst concussion you can get. On a scale of concussions, it was at the bottom. I didn't lose consciousness. I knew who I was, and I knew where I was. These were all good signs. In fact, 1 in 5 students will actually get a concussion in the regular season. And 90% of those concussions, you won't lose your consciousness and you won't black out. So I wasn't rare by any means. But what happened next was rare. So I followed my doctor's orders. I didn't do anything extensive for the next 3 weeks. No gym class, no extracurricular activities, and I didn't use my brain that intensely. No heavy thinking. Realistically, I just took it easy. It was all pretty good. The headache started to subside, the nausea, the dizziness started to fade away, and I started to come back to myself a little bit and feel more normal. Then, 4 weeks after the concussion, I woke up to something I had never experienced before. This was a feeling that I never knew. I woke up with a migraine. I had headaches before, I knew what a headache was, and I knew what that felt like, but a migraine was different. This migraine lasted 8 months. This was 8 months every single day with this pain. A few days into the migraine, all of my symptoms came back with a vengeance. The dizziness became severe vertigo that even when I was sitting down, I couldn't tell what was up or down. Everything was spinning. My visual sight was actually affected. I would see strobe lights going off my peripherals everywhere. The ground was constantly shaking. Moving through the day became such a challenge that I couldn't figure out where I was going, what I was doing, and how to even move through my life. Next, my cognitive skills were affected. I was unable to read and write the way that I used to. So imagine this, at age 16, in grade 11, unable to read and write. A simple question like, what is the date, was really hard for me to understand. Simple, just a few words, something we are asked every single day. For me, I would have to break it down word by word. What? What is the date? If I was able to even understand what this sentence was, it could take me up to 2 or 3 minutes to understand it. Answering the question was even harder. You would see words that would blend together. A word that I didn't mean to be there would suddenly show up, and none of it made sense. And I couldn't understand why this was happening. I didn't know what was going on. This affected me every single day. On top of that, I was struggling with speaking. You know that feeling when you have a word on the tip of your tongue, and you can feel it, you know it, and you just can't say it? That was me every single day, to the point where I was unable to have proper conversations. This was the new normal for me. As this progressed, I started to see different doctors, and I was finally diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome. And believe it or not, a lot of people actually have post-concussion syndrome, with around 50% of patients having these symptoms up to 3 months after the concussion, and another 10 to 15% having those last for over 1 year. I was the 10 to 15%. My symptoms lasted nearly 7 years. This wasn't something I was prepared for. This wasn't something that I knew was going to happen. As I was moving through this, the first year was the hardest. I was prescribed a lot of different medication to deal with this pain, the dizziness, the nausea, everything that I was feeling. I had to have different medications to control. This first year was a blur for me. I don't remember most of it. I don't remember who I was in that year, actually. When I speak to my mom about it, she'll often recall seeing her daughter my body, my personality, and everything, but something was missing. I was emotionless, my personality was muted, and I was distant. There is one memory I have of that year when I was 16, standing in front of my mirror at home, looking at myself and feeling so lost. What I saw wasn't who I was. My physical appearance had changed. I had gained weight from the medication, so what I saw wasn't who I knew. And then my personality wasn't there. I didn't feel like myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. So when I looked at myself, I felt two separate things. My mind and my body were separate. They didn't work together. My mind felt extremely betrayed by my body. Why was I in this pain? I didn't want this. I didn't want this confusion, this dizziness, this nausea. I didn't want to be 16 and not know who I was and to be just moving through the world without any sense of care or any sense of direction. I felt betrayed by myself. This was the biggest challenge for me to move past that. Over the next 2 years, I was able to lower down my medication, and I was able to get down to 1 or 2 different medications a day. At this time, my migraines were about 20 to 25 days of a month. Now that sounds pretty horrendous. Imagine 20 days with a migraine. For me, this was my new normal. And for me, that was progress. So when I was 18, I decided to move to Toronto, 5 hours away from my hometown. Really exciting time, going to school, getting my post-secondary education. I had a few friends in the city, but I had no family. The biggest struggle was actually to find a new doctor. I was willing to find any doctor that was willing to try anything. I wanted to try anything to get rid of this pain, to solve what was going on. So I visited numerous different doctors, tried many different techniques, and at the age of 22, I was still categorized as living in chronic pain with migraines anywhere from 15 to 25 days of a month. This was while I was in university, working a part-time job, and I had an internship. So my doctor had an idea. He explained to me about these neurons that we all have called nociceptor neurons. What they do is they actually detect signals of damage or potential damage, and then they let your action potential know, and it'll actually signal to your brain that you're in pain. So if you're playing soccer and you scrape your knee, your action potential will allow your brain to know that you've scraped your knee. So therefore you know your knee is bleeding or it's hurt. Sometimes when you're playing soccer, your adrenaline will carry you through and you won't actually feel that. So you'll be playing and all of a sudden at the end of the game you realize, wow, my knee really hurts. That's because the adrenaline actually washed away those potential actions. So for me, my doctor said that my body may have been actually sending these messages of pain when there was no damage. So there were such strong pain waves in my body that they might have been firing even when nothing was happening and no damage was being done. So what his approach was to stop all those pain waves. And how he did this was he took general anesthetic, a small amount of freezing, it was a small needle, and he inserted it on every vertebrae down my neck and into my shoulders in order to freeze any pain. I did this 3 times. The first time I did it, I was so confused after I had it done that I had to take a cab home. I was stuck in my bed for 2 days. I could barely move. I didn't understand what was happening to my body. The second time, I knew a little bit more. I knew what to expect. And by the third time, I knew what was happening, but there was no progress. Nothing changed. The pain was still there. I was just as dizzy. I didn't understand why it wasn't working. So this is when I went back to my doctor, and we sat down, and he said he had a solution. He told me to quit, that I should quit school, that I should quit my part-time job, I should quit my internship, and I should focus solely on my recovery. And that should be all of my attention, is getting better. So for me, when I heard that, that was terrifying. I was 23 in my 3rd year of university. I had already worked so hard to move to Toronto, to pursue my education, to have a life, to build my future, to have someone to tell me to quit and stop everything. It was gut-wrenching. So I found myself at a fork in the road. To the right, I could do what my doctor said. I could quit. I could move home to my small town with my mom and focus on my health and focus on my recovery. But I knew in my gut that if I were to do that, I wouldn't have the strength to move back to Toronto, that I already put so much on the line to come here and pursue my education that I wouldn't be able to do that for a second time. So the other path was to change my mindset and to flip it. These were my 2 paths that I had. at 23, I had to decide. I chose to change my mindset. When it comes to changing your mindset, I'm sure most of you have heard different lists, 5 steps to being more positive, the way to look at the world through brighter eyes. This isn't something that happens overnight, I can admit that, but it is something that is very powerful. When I was growing up, my parents always taught us to be thankful and grateful for the things we had. We would always note the house, our family, our friends, whatever it was, and be very thankful for that. And so I decided to take that one step further, and I started a thankful journal. For me, I would write down anything I was thankful for, whether that was the smallest thing of watching TV and enjoying it, or laughing with my friends. It didn't always have to be related to my physical health, but I always wrote down what I was thankful for. That changed my outlook. I stopped looking at the negative things, the things I didn't have, the things that I was losing out on, but rather the things I did have. Next, I decided to use some positive self-talk. I noticed the way that we speak to our friends. We're always encouraging them, we're building them up, we're supporting them. But then when we speak to ourselves, oftentimes we're tearing ourselves down. We're not supporting ourselves, we're not saying anything positive to ourselves. So I changed that. I would stand in front of the mirror and speak to myself in third person to encourage myself. Now this is very strange, trust me if you ever try this. Looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, Mary, your pain doesn't define you. Mary, your body offers you more than pain. It felt very strange, but it worked. I started to listen and believe what I was saying, and my body also started to listen. Lastly, I looked at what my body and my mind could do. These are our 2 most powerful tools that all of us possess, and I decided to use those. For the past 7 years, I was told not to work out, not to increase my heart rate, and to not jump, bounce, or move around to the point that I would actually get a migraine. So what I decided to do was go to the gym. I started working out. I started with the smallest amounts of workouts, and trust me, I was exhausted. And eventually, I started to go back, and I started to feel stronger. And my body started to feel more powerful because I was using it and because I recognized it. As I was doing these 3 things, my migraine started to soften. They went from 25 to 20 days a month down to 15. By the age of 24, I was no longer living in chronic pain. This was the first time in my life that I had less than 10 migraines a month, to the point where now I have less than 1 migraine a month. It's usually every second month. So these 3 things really shifted my future. These mindset changes were controlling what I was able to change in my life in order to move past that fork in the road. I'm sure most of you have faced a fork in the road, or maybe all the odds have been stacked against you, and you felt at a loss. What do you do? Where do you go? Who do you turn to? But the thing to remember is you actually turn to yourself. You look at your mindset, what you're able to do, and you remember these 3 things to help you move past whatever is blocking your path. So take a look at your life. Look at what you're grateful for. Be thankful for it. We're all in here today. This is an amazing experience. We all are pursuing our education, something that not everyone our age gets to do in this world. Be very grateful for those things. Start speaking to yourself the way you would speak to your friends. Encourage yourself. Speak to yourself in third person if that helps, but always have positive self-talk and affirmation. And lastly, know that your body and your mind are your most powerful tools that you have. Use those tools. Remember that they are yours to use for your entire life, and they are more powerful than you can ever imagine. At the end of the day, when you're stuck and you're trying to go uphill and you're trying to push through and you're looking to what's next, remember that your mindset can truly change your future. Thank you.